For your awards consideration, Max presents the Emmy Award-winning HBO original series, Succession. As a power struggle ensues, the Roy family weighs up a future where their cultural and political weight is severely curtailed. Don't miss the series IndieWire calls the end-all, be-all of TV. Emmy eligible for Outstanding Drama Series and all other categories. Succession is streaming now on Max. Welcome to In the Envelope, a podcast from Backstage, the one-stop shop for actors and creators both above and below the line. I am your host, Vinnie Mancuso, Backstage senior editor and professional entertainment obsessive. I'll be your guide through every corner of the creative industry with the help of some of your favorite stars. Here you'll find intimate, in-depth talks with today's most award-worthy names in film, television, and theater. Along the way, we'll get advice on living your best creative life, relatable stories of the highest highs and lowest lows, and maybe, just maybe, a rare peek in the envelope.
With improv, it's about trusting the emotions that are happening in you and hopefully being so present. Like, a lot of times it is riding a wave, and I think I touched on it earlier because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I like that danger. Like, improv is my high. That's how I get high, is like the danger of not knowing what's going to happen. And it's like there's a real thrill.
Welcome to another episode of In the Envelope, the Actors Podcast. I am your host, Backstage senior editor Vinnie Mancuso, and joining us today is the wonderful, the truly hilarious Jessica Williams. Now, a bit of table setting before we begin. When we recorded this conversation, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, had just sent out a vote to authorize a strike should negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers not go as planned. So when this episode drops on June 22nd, who knows where the entertainment industry will be? We certainly didn't know whether a strike will be on the horizon or not, but I do know that Jessica had some very timely, very intelligent thoughts on getting actors, and all artists, really, the pay and working conditions they so deserve. But that's not all we talked about, because Jessica also happens to be in one of the best TV shows of the past. I don't even know how long. It's just truly wonderful. Shrinking, the story of therapists who are also going through it in their personal lives as well. It's from the Ted Lasso team. It also stars Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. And to say Jessica is a scene stealer is almost a disservice to how truly dynamic she is in this show. And she really has some wonderful things to say about not only the show itself, but just her approach to acting overall and improv, and also how all of that affects her as a person. It's really, really fascinating. It's really, really insightful. Let's get right into it. Here is Jessica Williams. Jessica, how's it going? It's so nice to meet you.
It's good. Nice to meet you, Vinny.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I know this is a very interesting time in Hollywood. Not to date this podcast too much, but not great. But I was going to say, as you know, we're backstage, so we will always be on the actor side. We always want the best for the actors, whatever that would mean in this situation. Right. But
thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's we're keeping a close eye on it because it
definitely
it affects the working actor, it affects the aspiring actor, it affects everyone. So we
the writer and the director, like, it's all tied together in this huge. We really all have a very close relationship. You know, it's everyone's affected. It's wild.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully, by the time this episode comes out, we can cut this out because it's resolved and it's and everything's good.
But if it's not, I stand with the DGA. SAG-AFTRA supports the DGA. Vote yes for strike authorization for SAG. Doesn't mean we'll strike. It's just an authorization.
Just in case. Yeah, but it is a very interesting time, and that is where we are now. But I am also very interested in all the ways that got you here. To this place, to Shrinking, which is incredible, by the way, the journey that led you here. So I do want to start at the beginning and ask if you have any sort of acting origin story, a performance you saw or something you saw that where it really just honed in for you. Like, wow, that's it. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother. She was my best friend when I was a kid. I read a lot of books, and I liked this like 57-year-old Black lady was my grandma, and she was like my favorite person. And she would watch me a lot, like every weekend. And she was diabetic, and a lot of times she would stay in bed. But one of the big things she did was watch TV. She watched movies. And so I would sit and just watch TV and movies with her, like all the time. She would let me stay up. I could eat whatever I wanted. There was like a lot of benefits of staying at grandma's house, but a lot of what she watched was comedies. So she watched a lot of like Simpsons, South Park, Space Goes Coast to Coast, like Adult Swim. She'd watch The Critic. She'd watch Saturday Night Live, Mad TV, and then she watched like her mystery genre stuff. So she watched like Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, Perry Mason, just all sorts of stuff. Like she was just like a TV nut. And so I knew at a young age that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something on TV because it was a very valid medium, and it was like a big point of our relationship. And I loved our relationship. So I knew early on that that's what I wanted to do. And then I was really drawn to Saturday Night Live and Mad TV. So I watched like Alex Borstein on Mad TV. I'd watch Sherry O'Terry, SNL ladies, Anna Gasteyer, Maya Rudolph, who I love and I'm obsessed with. Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, like there was a lot, Molly Shannon. There was a lot of really, really like strong women that I liked comedically that I really looked up to. I was really into Whoopi Goldberg. I remember I got her Back to Broadway DVD back when like grocery stores would have DVD bins. And so I remember picking that up and just kind of like seeing how she straddled that line between comedy and drama in such a gorgeous, organic way that to me really spoke to, being a human being and also is in that shrinking world. And I really loved it. I also grew up watching Apatow movies. I'm 33, so I grew up kind of watching like all that stuff and like Freaks and Geeks and all that stuff. So I think like that and like Superbad really informed my taste and stuff like that. I just kind of watched anything and everything. And I just kind of knew I would do like talent shows and stuff in elementary school, but mostly dancing. Like I want to do that. And then I also wanted to be Left Eye from TLC or Aaliyah. Like I wanted to do like music.
So you had a lot of options. There really
I wanted to perform. I'm a Leo and Leo Moon, Aries rising, and that's my origin story.
I love that.
And so, yeah.
I love that your origin story is, just everything. It was just...
I just liked it all. Yeah.
But I love that you mentioned the formative experience of like taking something life-changing out of one of those bins, like not even knowing what it's going to be. You're like, but I like the way it's wrapped. I like the cover. I like, I'm going to come home. And it's something that you said sort of changes your life in the way you think. That's something that's sort of, I don't know, not missing, but it's kind of hard to have that experience of sitting in front of a TV.
Physically grabbing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It is something, I guess I never thought of it that way, where it's like, oh, these days, they're just clicking and clacking on their
exactly.
jacks.
Which isn't that different, but
you could fall in love clicking and clacking, but there was something very funny and nostalgic about a DVD bin in a grocery store.
Absolutely.
Do you remember those?
I do. I feel like what I remember is like walking past the like FYE or the Sam Goody, and it was just like, it's just like the possibility of so much physical media and like,
like Blockbuster, Hollywood Video.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cozy. That's just such a cozy.
I know, and it's such a weird thing to be like nostalgic for. It's like not it's such a strange thing to be nostalgic for. Like not even the movies themselves, just like going to Blockbuster and like looking at covers.
Always like that. I think it's always like that, where we're always like the next generation is nostalgic for this other thing, because even back then they were like, you guys go to Blockbuster and you pick these out. We used to use, I don't know, projectors. Like I don't know. It's always something that people are like nostalgic about.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll see what the next version of whatever that is. Hopefully it's a bit less, there's still some humanity in it. But I mean, do you remember the transition into, trying it? Like, I feel like when you're absorbing all these things, there's just a desire to perform. There's knowing that you want to perform. Do you have any point where it became a goal or like something that you were sort of setting yourself in motion for?
Yeah, I did it as a kid. Like my parents told me, I grew up in LA. I grew up in, well, more specifically, I grew up in a place called Harbor City, Torrance, Lomita area. So I grew up in the South Bay, baby. But it was really easy for me I had more access because my parents were like, get good grades and be nice to people. And that's fine, be responsible. So I remember doing like kids acting workshops and stuff like that, like scams where they would take your money and make you get all the headshots and everything at the same time and do the acting class and doing like a program. Bless my parents. We did that a couple times. But yeah, I did it. I did it all. I would do acting classes a lot. And I was just talking to people and like some other actors on the picket line for like SAG-AFTRA solidarity walks. And we were talking about actually how tough acting classes are and how traumatizing they can be and how really to be an acting coach, like a lot of people can do a lot of damage as an acting coach, and how we all had these ridiculous, crazy, traumatizing experiences with acting coaches throughout our whole lives that were just awful. Like, you know what I mean? And as a kid and as a teenager, and even as like somebody in my early 20s, wasn't really protected the way that I should have been, just even from someone being critical about you. And back then it's like most acting coaches are white. So white men. So what do they know about like teaching a young Black woman how to act? You know what I mean? Like a lot of them actually don't and didn't. Mm-hmm. And be more biased actually to the white actors in their class. And you just have no idea because you're like, oh, it's like the oddies, like I didn't have any idea. But we were all just literally remembering our acting classes that we had at formative years. And so I've been thinking about that a lot lately to just kind of work through with my therapist.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, I feel like someone who's looking to get into acting and doesn't quite know, what it is yet, that's a very malleable place to be. So it's a very...
Oh my gosh, you're so vulnerable. Yeah. It's like, who is the acting coach, Yeah. And I think there's like definitely got to be something soon where we all just kind of talk about the acting coach industry and how a lot of people can be taken advantage of, unfortunately. And also like a lot of times they would just try and like strip away your performance to make you this kind of generic person. Mm-hmm. And I've only booked like The Daily Show or been mildly successful. I'm not saying I'm super successful, but I'm grateful with like Two Dope Queens and that stuff is just versions of myself. Like that's just from your originality. And so I worry sometimes with the way acting classes have affected us that they're kind of stripping away originality sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting because, an acting coach and acting class can be beneficial, but it's almost like...
Absolutely.
If there was like a formula that could be taught, if it was like a science class that you could just teach people the equations, more people would do it. So it's almost like...
I've had great acting coaches too. Like, I don't want to make it seem like I've learned so much from acting classes. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to say that at all. However, I will say, I don't know if it's like a very regulated profession. And also like, I don't know if the acting coaches are actually doing like the therapy work that they should be doing, working with people's mental health and vulnerabilities. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I just like, there's a lot of drama in acting classes.
Yeah. And I think that's unfortunately a relatively new thing, is like paying closer attention to the overlap between, mental health and acting, and, the taking care of people and that shouldn't be a relatively new thing, but there's a brighter spotlight on that.
It is. I mean, we don't talk about, acting, and this is like the stuff I want to work on. Like, I'm trying to get more involved in SAG-AFTRA and our union and stuff, especially like, with everything that's been going on. We don't talk about the mental health of actors. And we have this job where, every day we go out and audition or we self-tape and we are asking for something, and maybe they'll pass on you for whatever reason, but you're getting these constant no's, which as opposed to somebody else in a different field, maybe they're not getting those direct no's as much. Sometimes you don't get it because you're tall. Sometimes you don't get it because of your race. Sometimes you don't get it because of your gender. Like, and sometimes they'll tell you why. And so that's really hard. And then also the only way you're going to be a good actor is if you have access to your emotions and you're living like you have to crackle inside and have a real easy access to, how you feel about things. So that's just in and of itself, like a mental health issue. And like, we don't process actually there is a version of our job, even though we get to do this gorgeous, gorgeous job of make-believe that's so fun, there is this part of it that's like, oh, also we're doing something that it literally involves our mental health, like every day. So I would like to figure out more resources for actors to work through that and actually acknowledge that what we're doing is quite strange and very vulnerable.
Which is, it's still a beautiful thing. Like it's
oh my God, it's like flying. Like it's like, especially with shrinking too, like it's my dream job because I feel like I'm flying. Like when I'm acting and doing a good scene and I feel like I'm in my bag, quote unquote, and I feel like I get to it feels like flying. I feel very comfortable when I'm acting on a really good job. Like I'm like, oh, I'm so lucky. Like this is why I do this. But there's so many barriers to get to this. There's so many barriers to get to that. And I'm a very lucky anomaly. And I think a huge majority of actors have a lot of barriers to get there, and they don't get there. And so there has to be something done about the majority and like making sure mentally we're sound but yes, you're right. Acting slaps, it rules.
Yeah. It's the weird gray area. It's, on one hand, could you imagine a better job? But on the other hand, it is just, the job is manipulating your emotions. The job is,
it is.
And that takes a toll on people.
Yeah, and people just say like no to you like lots of times.
Yeah, and I mean, there's
like lots of times.
The evolution of the no, which is the self-tape, which is a whole new
Oh yeah, that's a
form of no. Yeah, it's the ever evolving ways that people can say no to you as an actor.
Yeah, there's loads.
But I'm curious, you mentioned feeling very comfortable acting. Was that always there, or was there a point that you remember where you're like, oh, I'm strapped in now. Like I feel safer than
I will say I am not a good auditioner. I have acting friends that are so good at auditioning. I think that's a different skill set. Like that is like, you're a beast if you're really good at auditioning. Like it is a whole ass job. And I'm still not a great auditioner. I have a lot of anxiety and I have OCD and I get really in my head about it. And so a lot of times it's really nice when I get like an offer like with Shrinking where they're like, okay, we like her other stuff. We're just going to let her like come on and do this job. So no, I don't feel comfortable until I've also been like fired from a job before. Like, no, I'm never comfortable until I see it on camera. Like there's a part of me that has so much fun doing Shrinking, but you never know if they're going to cut you out entirely. Like, until you see it on film. But they were they never indicated at all that they were unhappy with it.
There was no threat.
That's just in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. That just comes from being an actor for like 15 years. Like just being like, you never know. You never know. Yeah. They could actually all not like you and they're just saying they like you.
This was a very long con and the rug will be pulled out any second
they're
now.
doing this really elaborate, like really messed up mental game.
And they really got me. They
got me. Yep, you got me.
So I do want to talk about Shrinking, of course, because it's such a unique thing. It is hard to describe to people because if you give them the plot, you give them the just the synopsis, they're like, that sounds like a bummer, but it's such an
I understand
life affirming show. It's funny. So I'm curious, what's the pitch to you as someone who's going to be in the show?
It was more of a vibe talk. Like they had the first couple episodes written only, and it was me and Bill Lawrence and Neil and our head writer and Jason and then I met with Brett Goldstein after, but it was more of a vibe talk, especially with Gabby, because Gabby, the first few episodes, she's not really in those, but they knew she would be in all the episodes after that. And so it was sort of like this is kind of general vibe. It's about grief, but it is a comedy, and I love that. As someone who has grieved and is always grieving. I actually found when I was the saddest, when I was grieving, that things were profoundly funny to me. They were deeply funny and very moving. So I was really interested in that. And I was really interested in, I love Jason Segel's work. And so it was sort of I'll try it. I'll do it, And I loved Scrubs also. I think Scrubs is a really nice early predecessor for the show in that it's about these doctors and people die all the time on Scrubs. It doesn't always go well. But it's a very goofy, silly, fun show. And so I knew I was, in good hands. I just kind of had to trust that Gabby would come together and that the show would come together. And a couple of days after I said, I do it, I found out Harrison Ford was going to play Paul. And that was like, I was like, oh shit, this is awesome. But I had no idea. It was one of those, those moments when you book something or, you get, things start to line up and you just go, yes. Like literally, like if you're just listening to this audio only, like I just did like a fist pump.
Yeah, it was very joyous. Like I wished I
it was just, but it's like almost like whispering almost, where you're like, yes, yeah, like a little bit of that. But I mean, the Harrison Ford of it all just kind of blew me away, and I knew I made the right choice, and so that's how we got started. But they were like, what excited me about it was they were like, we don't quite know Gabby, but we want this to be written to the actress that plays her. Like we want it written to her skill set. We know you come from a comedy background, which is really nice, and we want to enjoy that, and so we'll allow you to improvise on set a lot of the time. And they stuck to that, and it was a dream job for me. Like it was great. But what I found was like all of the previous coaching that I had kind of came together with all the comedy that I did with The Daily Show, and I used to do this thing called Comedy Sports, and I did Upright Citizens Brigade, and it came together with Two Dope Queens, this podcast I did for a while, and then I did Fantastic Beasts, so I learned about acting within the confines of a script, and like I learned about acting in a period piece in costume. So I grew as an actor in that way, and acting on a set with people that are like very serious English actors almost. So I learned about that. And then I also learned about I learned how to work with big movie stars on Fantastic Beasts, I think. And then added a little bit of Love Life season 2, which I felt like it really came together. And then everything that I had learned and everything I had watched when I was a kid and weird stuff all came together in this project to create Gabby. Like it was like a part of it was throwing my acting class a little out the window, but I'd been doing it for so long that it was ingrained in me, and just trusting myself, which was really nice. It was a really rewarding job.
For your awards consideration, Max presents The Last of Us, the HBO original series starring Pedro Pascal as Joel, a hardened survivor hired to smuggle Ellie, a 14-year-old girl, out of an oppressive quarantine zone. What starts as a small job soon becomes a brutal and heartbreaking journey as they both must depend on each other for survival. Don't miss the critically acclaimed series Empire calls a masterpiece. Emmy eligible for Outstanding Drama Series and all other categories. The Last of Us is now streaming on Max. People who want to be an actor, people who want to be an entertainer, who want to perform, they have the idea of what it'll be like when they get the dream job, when they get the things will all come together. So I'm curious, can you describe like the moment where things come together like that? What is that day like? How are you receiving that information where someone says, we want you to be in this show and Harrison Ford's going to be in it and it's going to be all of your skill set. It's all coming together.
Yeah, I think it's just like any other day where you're at work, because my job is to focus on my scene partner and also like be as present as possible. And so for me, my goal in shrinking was to just be as present as possible and really listen to my partner. So that's why I like acting so much, is because I get to go away for a while and discover really new things with each take. And so I'm not even thinking about, oh, I'm doing a good job right now. Mm-hmm. There's a subtle confidence that comes with just listening on camera. It's like undeniable. But I think I had to, and some days I would like listen better than others. So it wasn't like every day was like a cakewalk. It was like some days I would have like, I'd be on my period and I'd know it, and I'd be, cramping and not in a good mood, but I'd still have to act. Or, like I was tired that day, or they changed the lines and I had to figure it out. So it wasn't like I felt like I'm doing it now. Like it was just more so like I said, from when I start to when I wrap, I'm just going to listen and try and be as present as possible. And that was my only job. And so that's what it just felt like. It felt like when I was actually working, I could fall into the scene because I was able to get in the habit of just being in the scene and not needing to be anywhere else. So nothing else mattered. I probably like missed emails and texts from friends and stuff. That's probably the biggest thing. You just kind of are a little more flaky in your social life because you're like
understandable
focusing. Yeah, you're like really just kind of in it. And it was fun because I wouldn't know, like, if Harrison does a take and he looks at me a certain way, I'm going to react to it a certain way. And on this job in particular, I was able to do that. Like, it was such an elastic kind of show that I could, with Bill Lawrence and Jason and Brett in charge, there was room for me to just react to every little thing that was on screen. And so, yeah, it was like I would just forget my phone, I think, when I was present in a scene.
I love that. The Harrison Ford of it all is very interesting to me because in my profession, he has a reputation for not being an easy person to talk to, but just in a
he doesn't like interviews.
Just doesn't like doing interviews. So it's like I love
all.
talking to his coworkers because it's like, well, he'll never talk to me like that. He doesn't want to talk to me.
Funny.
But I as a scene partner, you know, that's you're working with someone who's, you know, seen it all, and you're reacting to him. So I'm curious.
Yeah, he does really care about acting. Like, I don't know what it's like to be over 80 and, you know, having done interviews and also be you know what I mean? Like,
I wouldn't want to do interviews for 80.
No. And like, I'm like 33 and like now sometimes I look at teenagers and I'm like, ugh, you want to go out and do that? Like, some friends in my 20s, I'm like, ugh, you want to go to like Zebulon right now? I'm tired. Like, you know, I'm like, I don't want to do any of that shit. So I get it. And it's like anybody that I know that's like over 55, like, are you freaking kidding me? You think you can tell anybody over 60 that they're going to do this thing and they're not going to have some shit to say about it? Like, they're not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
That guy just want to do interviews. I get that.
No hard feelings whatsoever.
And that's like literally like the movie star. He's like one of the last few like box office movie stars. So I don't know if we could fathom the amount of parties he's doing shit that he's had to do as an actor. That being said, he is a very, very giving actor and he does care about acting. So, you know, I always felt like I had a really great scene partner and I always felt like he really cared. And so, you know, he definitely wasn't like that at all because he liked acting. And it was great because a little bit of that, you know, I watched a lot of his interviews to prepare for him being my boss on the show. And there's something really nice about him having that trait and being notorious for it because it ties a lot into Paul too. And I think that really shaded Paul and Gabby's relationship. And I think it really shades Paul and Jimmy's relationship too. And how I love the kitchen scenes because if you can catch it, sometimes it's just Gabby and Jimmy vying for the affection of Paul. Like they both in their own ways want to be loved by him. And I think, you know, that's like what a lot of people I think that do interviews are like, I want to interview you. And I also want to be loved by you, Harrison, please. You know, like you always
that's the worst thing you can do.
I relate to that. I want him to like me.
You want to, please, I want your approval, please.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all kind of have that. And so, but that really worked for my character because he's like her loose mentor.
Absolutely. So I read you say something about, I think it was either Vanity Fair or something like that. You were describing your improv, the way that you do improv. I think you described it as riding the wave. You're not sure what's going to come out of your. I'm very curious about that, you know, because improv is one of those elusive concepts for a lot of people, where it's like it's sort of unattainable to learn for a lot of people. So I'm curious what you mean by that in terms of riding the wave and how you've learned to turn it into a skill and something that you can actively use as an actor.
Yeah, I think I've been doing improv in one way or another since I was like, for a while, since I was like 14, I auditioned for my school's improv team and got on. And so even then I was just doing like short form comedy and short form games, which is actually really nice because short form improv is like great in a sense. There's like a couple of schools of improvisation and there's classes available for everything. It's more like whose line is it anyway? But that's fun too because it just keeps your brain really elastic and there's like a skill set there. I think there was like definitely coming up like Upright Citizens Brigade and doing like improv in that way is really cool. And like, it's like a really cool sort of like punk, like DIY kind of feeling. And then there's like this more like, there's like the Second City Comedy Sports of it all. That's sort of more so like a little bit old school and then almost like fast food almost. Sometimes people can think of short form improv like that. So there's like this kind of like, there's like a little bit of snobbing and like, it's like a whole thing, but I did both. And, you know, it's about like, you're just going to fail. Like you're going to say really embarrassing stuff. Like I've said embarrassing things And acting is actually very embarrassing. Like the act of acting is it's just embarrassing. Like you're going to make yourself feel something on camera and cry. You're going to maybe forget a line. You're going to maybe kiss this person on screen. Like that's embarrassing. You maybe, you're going to wear like a boob cap basically and simulate that you're new. Like, it's like, you're very vulnerable, but with improv, it's about trusting the emotions that are happening in you and hopefully being so present. Like a lot of times it is riding a wave. And I think I touched on it earlier because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I like that danger. Like, I'm like, improv is my high. That's how I get high, is like the danger of not knowing what's going to happen. And it's like, there's a real thrill. There's a thrill of, I think the best way to do it is to know the lines, learn it the night before, or however your process is. If you need to learn it on the morning, don't overwork it, but just know like what emotion you feel in the scene and be very specific. And then just kind of listen to your partner on camera and like, it's like effortless. You're like, oh, right. And then also be on the right set, because a lot of directors will lose your shit if you just start improvising. Like it's actually a faux pas. It's just do the right show. But it's about like, I don't know, just trusting that you know how you respond to things, and just kind of just being focused on your scene partner.
You mentioned that you've been doing improv for a long time, and there is so much trust of yourself involved. You have to. I'm curious if that level of trust has always been at the level it is now, or if you had to sort of remind yourself that you'll eventually get there, or is that something you had to sort of develop over time?
I think like heck no. Like I don't think right now, so I'm so out of practice, I could get on a stage and do an improv show at this time, but I could definitely do a film scene, and I can improvise within the confines of the scene. Like I can do that. Especially that's the other part, is make sure it's in the world and the scene that the writers created, so that they don't think you're like a dick just rewriting the whole thing. But no, it just depends on the day. And I think confidence is like a journey and not a destination. Like sometimes you wake up and you feel really confident, like you can take on the world. And then some days you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like working today, But I find that I usually wake up when I realize that in every scene, I want a really organic reaction. And so it kind of wakes me up and tunes me into the scene of like the danger of not knowing what's going to happen and that I'm going to react that way, or the danger, like I got to work with Jason Segel a lot, and he's a really good improviser, and I got to see him do a lot of tricks and do a lot of moves up close and personal. And that was not only that, but then I also got to do that with him a lot. And it's also good to have a really good scene partner, because sometimes you improvise and you just don't have the same comedic taste as the other person. Also, like even after projects that I've done a few after Shrinking, like it's just like, oh, like you still just have to not only like you're funny and trust that you're funny, you have to be with the right group of people and on the right show or job that thinks you're funny. And if you're not, and you are funny, don't change, because then you're going to lose what makes you unique. It's like, oh, great. Because then one day after this strike, I'm going to go back to work on Shrinking, and I get to be Gabby again, and I get to like be like funny, but there's still people that are just always going to tell you you're not funny. And like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it harkens back to exactly what you're saying about the sort of innate danger of any bad acting teacher. Like it's so dangerous to strip away what makes an actor original. It's so.
Oh yeah, and a lot of times it's just like a straight white dude telling you that. So then now that we're all sort of questioning, like, talking about identity and like, especially in acting and who we are, it's more important now than ever. It's always been important, but it's also like, what am I going to listen to this straight white dude for? Like what? Like so
different wavelengths. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he doesn't think I'm funny. Like what? So what?
Absolutely.
I don't know. Yeah. My friends think I'm funny, so that's nice.
I love that. I'm curious. You mentioned someday you will go back to doing Shrinking season 2, but you've also mentioned that you sort of found through improvisation and experimenting, you've sort of found Gabby throughout season 1. So I'm curious what that's like now that you've gone through a season and there's a season 2 ahead, and you're sort of in this in-between period. Like, are you still finding Gabby? Do you feel like, I'm curious what it's going to be like to then go back to the show with a
that
much
feels
better
really
idea.
Yeah, it's nice to know her relationships with everybody. Like now that we kind of have that figured out, like, the show is relationships, and that's like also the most important thing in the scene is the relationship. And so I know that now. I know her relationship with Kristen Miller's character, Liz. I know her relationship, like, you know, with Lukita, who's also amazing and plays Alice. Like, I know those things now. And so I'm really excited to do it again. But I am scared because it's been a while in the back of my mind that I can't do it again. So I'm having this little voice like that I won't be able to tap into Gabby again, or like we won't be able to find that sweet spot of the lines, or that I will never be able to improvise again. Like that, I think that comes with every job that I have, where it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do it again. I don't know if I have it or if I lost it. You know, I'm a little worried, and I'm working through it. And I don't think I'll be able to fully get rid of it until, you know, we're in it and I'm present between action and cut, you know. Like, but I'm pretty nervous about it, to be honest, with every...
I'm sorry for bringing it up, but
Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that?
I mean, it is that sort of, you know, when you think about acting, you think about therapy, you know, like you gotta sort of, even when you don't feel like doing it, you go and you see what you get when you go. And it's something that I'm glad that people are talking about more. Something that I'm glad that shrinking is sort of broadcasting more. And, yeah, it's just a really beautiful thing, this show.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think we should talk about that more in general.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up here, I am curious how you found, if there's anything small you found that helps you get to work on the day when you don't feel like going. Is there anything that gets you there?
I do like the lucid body technique in general. Like, that one's really cool because I really live in my body. I try and do like a modified version of that. So I'll just maybe meditate for 5 minutes and just like breathe. Little TM is great too, but just some modified version where you're just like breathing, right? And checking in, feeling your heartbeat, your feet on the floor. Stretching is always really good. Like, if I get a good kind of stretch or little walk in before I act, I feel like I can move in my body. Like, sometimes I just have to like wake up the creaks in my bones. Like, you just have to make sure I feel flexible. And then in particular for Gabby, I would sing like Disney songs on the way to work a lot of the time to just get in that really childlike, playful world. Like, I think Gabby is very playful. And so that was probably the number one thing. I think it comes through in her clothes. It comes through in her clothes a lot, but in her relationships with everybody. So I would do, how do I get into that? Okay, I'm going to listen to Disney music. Okay, she's feeling sexy. How do I do that? Okay, I'm going to listen to like something that makes me feel sexy, like Juicy by Doja Cat. Like, it's like, and I make playlists, like hacking my brain that can convince me to get to where I need to be by the time I get on set. And then also, this is what I learned on Fantastic Beasts, like watching really seasoned actors work, like English actors work, not being afraid to hold space for what I need. So like, there's a scene I did with Jimmy and like being with Jason, and she's talking to him about how she misses Tia too, his wife who passed away. And that night, you know, I just needed to hold space for myself to be grieving. And so I didn't really talk. Like, I was like separate before my takes. I would just go in the side room and everybody understood. Which is why we had such a great DP. Like, everybody understood, and I was on a really good set and everybody held space. Now, if I was younger and in my 20s, I would be really nervous about holding space to get to where I needed to be to grieve. But no, I held it, and I like to make people feel comfortable and warm in a space, and I just didn't. I was like, okay, for this one, I hope everybody knows I love them, but I'm going to try and get here because my only job is to, you know, play the scene, and I need to be here. But really holding space and like holding space for what you need without being like a dick is nice too.
Absolutely. That's really wonderful. Jessica, thank you so much again for
Thank you, Vinnie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was really wonderful. And I again, shrinking is it's hard to describe, but I can't recommend it enough because it's never just sad, it's never just funny. It feels like life, which is
that's great.
I wish more art did.
What we want. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, as always, to our brilliant producer, Jamie Muffett, and to the whole team at Backstage. Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Casey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage with code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. 100% free, you simply cannot beat that. For more exclusive content, find us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who should we interview next? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another peek in the envelope.